On researchgate.net, you have over 18,000 reads and over 4,000 citations. Professor Jane, you are a PhD and you currently hold a position as Associate Adjunct Professor at University of California in Berkeley, Haas School of Business. You will say more about yourself in a few minutes when I give you the floor. Marty Kooistra is an award-winning businessman and is known as a leading businessman in providing affordable housing solutions. For over 30 years, Mark, you have been a champion in building strategic alliances for community revitalization and affordable housing. One key question that struck my mind while reading about you, Mark, was how does you manage to be a successful businessman and a social network crack as well? So one last thing about you, Mark, you are the Executive Director of the Housing Development Consortium of Seattle King County in California, which is a consortium with 180 members, and you focus on affordable housing solutions. And then in the background, I can say in the background, Professor Annelies Straat from Sweden. She's a PhD in education with the background, Master Studies in Applied Statistics and Development and Comparative Education. You have over 25 years of professional experience in educational planning, policy analysis, research and program monitoring. You are a gender advocate, and you strongly believe that democracy and human rights-based approach to education are key to development. So you three will lead the session, and the key guest speakers are Marty Kooistra and Professor Jane Wei Skillern. Maybe you have more to say about yourself, but this is a few I can say. So over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. If you don't mind muting your mic, feedback.
Thank you. So it's great to be here with all of you. We're very excited to have the opportunity to join you and have a couple of sessions to engage with you on this topic that we are equally passionate about, as far as how to achieve greater mission impact in your organizations, in your communities, in your countries. So let me just start with a quick overview of what we'll plan to cover in our session this morning or this afternoon for you all. First is just a brief overview of my research on network principles and leadership. And then I'll turn it over to Marty, and he'll share some of his personal experience working as a senior executive in the nonprofit sphere, focusing on housing, affordable housing in particular. And then Marty will bring us into some of the hows, the 5 C's of creating and sustaining networks. And then finally, I'll share a little bit more deeply about some case studies from my research to give you a better sense of where these ideas come from and how they are grounded in field level experience, such as that you bring. So let me turn it over now to the next topic, which is really a big high-level overview of what this work entails and where the ideas come from. So the research is based on the last 20 years of my work as an academic, studying leading-edge nonprofit networks and really trying to understand across a range of different fields, whether it's economic development domestically in the US or internationally, or social services, animal rescue, environmental conservation, climate change, the arts, housing, a range of different fields. And I've looked at case studies from large foundations to very small grassroots organizations, and just looked for thriving networks and tried to understand, what do these organizations have in common? And what's interesting is, even if these networks are vastly different, they come from different fields, they're different sized organizations, different resources, they actually share a fundamental set of principles in common across all of them. And that's what I have been teaching about, writing about over the past couple decades, is to get these ideas out, because there's so much wisdom that can be relevant to leaders such as yourselves as far as how to do your work with greater impact without necessarily having more resources at your disposal. So let me just share the ideas in a nutshell. The first is, the key idea is that a network leadership approach is going to require a dramatic shift in your mindset. In that a lot of these principles are counterintuitive because they run counter to what we typically see from a managerial framework, from an institutional level management approach. They're focused much more on the macro level at the network level. And you'll see in a minute what I mean. So the first idea is that these organizations, every single case study that I've looked at of a leading network, is that there's an emphasis on the mission rather than the organization's interest. And it's not to say that organization interests don't matter, but every strategic decision is made with an eye toward to what degree does that advance our mission. So organizations and their networks may do things such as refer a funder to a peer that might be better able to deliver on a particular program. They might actually fundraise on behalf of another organization in their network, or they might say, well, actually, we're not so skilled at doing this particular programmatic approach, but we have a peer organization that is very competent and focused on this issue area. Let's share what we know about the issue and help them develop and invest in building the field and building up their peers to deliver a particular program or approach. So it's much more focused on the macro, the network itself, rather than just the organization and advancing organizational growth goals. And the second idea is this concept of governance through trust rather than control. So you might have contracts, MOUs, formal control mechanisms in place. However, the thing that fundamentally makes these networks tick is a deep level of trust and alignment of values and a reciprocity amongst the parties involved in the network. That's truly what governs the network. And that takes a lot of due diligence up front to find the right network partners so that you are values aligned and you build the relationships deliberately by investing time and energy into the relationship itself before even any work gets done. So some of the networks that I've studied, they might spend months or even up to a year just getting to know their partners to see, are we a good fit for each other? Are we equally committed to the mission and working toward that goal primarily? To what degree can we work together and demonstrate our commitment to each other? And that is what enables them to have a foundation of trust on which to build a thriving network. The next piece is this notion of humility rather than self-promotion. And this idea is rings true across all of the different network members, and that there is no dominant program, there's no dominant strategy, but rather an awareness of not only what each individual member brings to the table, but also what they are missing and what they need from their partners. So even if there's a member in the network that brings the bulk of the financial resources, they know they also rely heavily on community relationships and credibility of local organizations and leaders. And so that money does not mean they get to dictate everything that happens in the network because they hold the purse strings, but rather there's an equal footing amongst all of the different members to say, well, what's going to give us the best result? And that voice is lifted up of every member, not just those that command the most resources. And at the same time, when it comes to recognition, the network members are often in the habit of making their partners look good, that they don't necessarily always try to get all of the attention or the recognition, but rather say, well, this is a work of our joint progress. It's not just my work that I should get credit for. And what we found is that network leaders are often able to grow the pie of resources because they're working in a high functioning network and getting greater results. And that humility actually is able to carry them further because of that. Finally, the last principle is quite simple, is this idea of the organizations and their leaders are not trying to be the brightest star in the field. And the reality is, we all know, those of us who've worked in the social sector, is that being the brightest star will never be sufficient. That is, the institution alone, no matter how well resourced, no matter how reputable, how successful in its work, can never achieve the scale or the depth of impact that we're seeking, because the challenges that we face are so great. In that case, we need to mobilize the other stars around us and build a beautiful constellation in order to deliver on that larger mission impact. And so that approach, that picture in the leader's mind of, we're building constellations, not trying to dominate the field, not trying to get the most recognition, that constellation building is always happening amongst the network members. So the network is dynamic, it's fluid, it's changing as you're starting to array the various peers around you. But that is the final principle in the network principles that I've seen. So there you have it. It's quite simple. 4 key values: a mission focus, trust rather than control, an emphasis on humility and making your partners look good, and finally, this idea of constellations, not stars. And this is the only challenge, of course, is that the concepts in bold are actually what are critical to the success of a network. And as you know, as managers, as leaders of organizations and institutions, you're often incentivized to focus on the latter values, which is grow your organization, expand programs, get more control and power in your own institution, focus on brand building so you can bring in the next fundraising dollar, and of course, try to be a leading player in the field to get more recognition, again, to bring in more resources to your cause. But the reality is, for a network impact, and I truly believe a network approach is what is required to get scalable transformational change. And it's really these other values of organization, control, brand, and stars that can get us only to incremental change. And so I've spent the bulk of my career emphasizing and sharing the wisdom that I've gained from studying all of these case studies that speak to these these values printed in bold: mission, trust, humility, and constellations, and helping people realize the power of this approach. And I'll have a chance to go deeper into some of the case studies later, but I'm going to turn it over to Marty now to share his experience and his work as a network leader. Marty?
Well, thank you, Jane, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to be here with you, and thank you also for sending your good vibes our way. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey to learning about networks and how I've applied them, and then share with you some basic concepts for how to actually form a network and help it succeed. So I was privileged to meet Jane in 2004, about 15 or more years ago now, and we really found some resonance in what we were trying to accomplish. I was busy trying to figure out how to help Habitat for Humanity affiliates in the United States do what we were doing in other parts of the world with our Habitat programs, which was really grow our scale and capabilities without necessarily, as Jane says, trying to grow our organizations themselves. The work in the United States had stagnated in its growth. And so we were busy trying to figure out how can we actually accomplish a whole lot more by just building better partnerships, better connections, better relationships. And Jane will share some slides later in her case studies about how we learned how to better do this. But shortly thereafter, and we can go to the next slide, when I met Jane, Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. And so I was involved in helping respond Habitat for Humanity's work in the Gulf Coast. There was a significant amount of urgency. It was a very specific geography. We had very little infrastructure in the particular area where the hurricane had hit. And the model that we were using was not scalable. Now, why I want to share this with you is because when you have an event or a catastrophe or a disaster, it does help create a sense of urgency. And it does help people think about things differently. If we go to the next slide, Jane. So here you have two examples of ways of looking at how you get scale. And on the left-hand side, you see the traditional way in which we as an organization at Habitat for Humanity thought about how we do our work. We tried to find more heroes, people who will step up and work at a greater pace, find more people to do things in a traditional way. And we might see growth for a short period of time, but then we get to this exhaustion period where we cannot sustain it. And so on the right-hand side in the other graphic, our real goal there was to figure out new ways of doing things as opposed to doing things the same way and getting the same result. And so for us, and the work that I led in the Gulf Coast, it was about partnerships, alliances, and building networks with traditionally competing organizations. We were actually working together hand in hand, and the disaster, the calamity, if you will, caused the opportunity for people to feel this sense of urgency and work together more carefully. Now, we asked the question then, why is it that we cannot repeat that same sense of urgency day to day? Why do we have to go back to our old approaches and fall into that place of focusing more on organization rather than on mission? And this is why Jane's principles are so critical. Next slide, please. So all the research that Jane has done and all of the friends that we have met over the years who do this successfully tend to give us three reasons why networks are so important. And I want to share the first one with you in the next slide. Growth is really hard. So for nonprofits, NGOs, and partnerships between NGOs and the public sector and government, trying to get scale and do that in a sustainable way is extraordinarily challenging. And this is a hard thing for us to accept. We tend to think that we can use organizational design and capacity building strategies and naturally try to grow our scale through growing our organizations. And no matter how good you are at doing that, however much resources you can garner, you still experience this huge challenge of doing it in a sustainable way. And so we really see networks as a way to attack this issue of scale and sustainability. Next slide, please. Can we hit the next slide, Jane? Or is it stuck?
Well, it is already advanced to field observation number 2.
Oh, no. There you go. A little delay there, I think. Thank you. So, large global NGOs, INGOs, are dwarfed by the scale of the problems they seek to address. And so this is the other hard part for us to accept. And this goes to Jane's point that she mentioned earlier about humility. Us willing to express this truth that what we're up against, the gap in our services versus what is needed, is usually much larger than we as organizations can accomplish. I will just give you an example. For many years, I traveled around the world and I would talk about Habitat for Humanity's work. And I would say we are starting a new Habitat for Humanity home every 6 minutes somewhere around the world. And audiences would be agog at that. They had no idea at the size of the organization. But then I would say, we're only 92,000 houses short, right? And so the magnitude of the things we are trying to accomplish requires us to think differently about how we design our approaches. How do we leverage our assets, and how do we make sure that we can do this again in a sustainable way. And then let's try field observation 3, Jane. Next slide.
It's there.
All right, it's probably coming up soon.
That's right.
It's still stuck. Let's see.
Well, field observation number 3 is how we define success matters.
Yeah, I'll just talk through it. I don't know in the room there, Jonas, if you can see the slides advancing, but they're not advancing here yet. So in this third observation, we tend to see the issues of success being defined by how our organizations perform, not necessarily by the impact that we're going to have. And so we're really struggling in field observation 3 about how do we really share our global impact, and how can we actually measure that if we're doing it isolated organization by organization rather than cumulatively across organizations. So for whatever reason,
Maybe we can try to share the screen from here.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Then I'll
stop sharing.
Go
up.
Two more slides up. There we go.
Up one, right?
Yes.
Slide
18, right?
This will work. Oops. There we go. Okay, Jonas. I will tell you when to.
Okay, good. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So we'll go to the next slide. There we go. And Jonas, if you could mute your mic.
Sorry, Marty?
Yes.
Can
you mute?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. I need you to mute your mic if you can.
Done.
Thank you. Okay. So this is the last of the 3 observations that we talked about, and this is really this question of if we're going to have significant impact on an issue, our ability to measure that impact when it's done isolated in various organizations is really a challenge. So we want to try to figure out in the network model, how can we cumulatively measure our success? Next slide, please. So again, building on what Jane's research has told us and the principles that she shared, we know that if our goal is to mobilize organizations and resources together, we will have more impact than when we try to work competitively or have certain organizations out in front and using this notion of collaboration as something that we do in name only, or we do it in a very haphazard or limited way. And so what we're really trying to share with you here today is the fact that to truly do collaboration in a way that has impact, You have to change that mindset. You have to change a lot of the ways in which we've traditionally done things and come up with new incentives and new rewards for working together. And now we're going to share with you some examples of how to think about how that working together actually happens. Next slide, please. So this different leadership mindset and different ways of accountability or measuring our success. And the success now changes to how do we value the network as the primary vehicle for how we do our work instead of measuring the success of organizations. Next slide, please. There are 5 C's, we call them. These are concepts that start with the word C that we're going to walk through. The first is making sure that we have clarified our shared purpose. And we'll do an exercise in a little bit that talks about this. And what's really critical is that it's a shared purpose. In other words, it does not come down as a mandate from some entity, but it comes more from people working together. And so what often happens, and might be the case in your example, where we believe we know what that shared purpose is, but once we get in a room with our network partners, we spend time and invest in really understanding that. Convene the right people, cultivating trust, coordinating existing actions, and then ultimately collaborating for systems impact. So let's go to the next slide, please. If we think about this circle diagram as a container, what we want to do is be very clear about creating that container and what is it that we will do as our shared purpose. There are all kinds of things out there on the periphery or around our shared purpose that we could do, but we want to be focused and honed in. Now notice also that this circle is not drawn with really solid lines, because what we find when we're developing our networks is we need to be agile. We need to be flexible. Some of what we will experience will tell us new things about how to look at the issue. And so the container has to have the capability of flexing and moving depending on what we learn and how our network partners evolve into the relationship. So clarifying our shared purpose is critical, but it's also critical for people to be flexible in that space to be able to make sure that our purpose meets the needs that we're trying to address. Next slide, please. Then what we want to do, like you are doing today and yesterday, is convene the right people to build our network. And we know that as you leave your experience tomorrow, you will be working on doing this very task, drawing in the right organizations and the right people who can be part of your network effort. And it's critical to also be flexible in this regard, because there are times when we've learned that we've missed someone who should be part, some organization that should be part of our network. So we're constantly thinking about who is in the room or who is in our network and who else should be and who else could be. And a lot of this evolves from our dialogue and our conversations and our attempts at doing the work. Next slide, please. So Jane mentioned this in her principles, and we cannot say enough about this particular aspect of the work. And tomorrow, when we're with you, we will be doing some exercises specifically around reinforcing your relationships, thinking about things from a symbiotic rather than a transactional perspective. How is it that we can build our relationships in such a way that there's gives and gets in the relationship? and that we can all do this trust building with intention. And I want to just call out that this is not trust in the typical way where we're doing it for acceptance, affirmation, or even agreement. The trust goes back to our shared purpose, the container of what we want to try to accomplish, and we build trust around that accomplishment. Next slide, please. So this is the other very important thing that we've learned about networks, is that when we learn more about each other and we learn about what our organizations are each doing or how we've attempted to do things, where we're successful, where we're not as successful, all of that learning comes together in the network environment, and we can begin to support each other just through what we're already doing. A lot of times people find this idea of collaborating is all about starting something new. And in many cases, there are new things that we will do, but there are also existing things that are happening that if we could just replicate, or we could just tweak a little bit in this environment or that environment, use the contextual elements of how they're working in a particular location and how they're not working in a different location from country to country. What can we actually glean just by talking and hearing and experiencing what each other is doing? And so this is a very critical part of the whole aspect. And tomorrow, again, we will do another exercise where we talk about what we can give as an organization and what we can get from the network. And usually when we're doing this, it already tells us a lot about where we can have success and things that we can replicate. And then we will go to the next slide. Once we've done this learning network piece, then we really want to think about becoming an impact network. And this is ultimately where you all are headed, is how can we really change the dynamics and have much more success and do it sustainably. And in this environment, you see what happens is we have our core team of leaders, and then we have other groups and organizations working on various aspects within our network. And we're starting to do things in a way that we co-create rather than someone goes off on their own and we have duplicate activities happening all over the place that are disconnected. So the idea here in co-creation is really to eliminate waste, eliminate redundancy, and gain the most possible value out of our relationships, and do it in a way that's scalable, and do it in a way that is sustainable. So in other words, what might happen within this container, this shared purpose effort, is I might discover that I no longer need to do something that I was once doing because someone else can do that better, right? And this is where Jane's principles really come into play, because all of us have fear when we are doing change in our organizations. And what's the thing that we fear most? It's loss. It's not the change itself. It's what I might have to give up. It's what I might lose in that network relationship. And this is some of the hardest parts of what we've learned over the years, is really trying to figure out how can we do this in a sustainable way, and how can we do it in a way that provides the rewards and the incentives to help the network thrive. And this is why we have to be truly honest with each other and build that trust, because otherwise there are always all of these underlying things that are happening in our interactions. Okay.
Yes, Marty. Before we go on to the next slide, would you allow us 2 minutes to fix something, technical issue, before we proceed?
Okay. Please.
Thank you.
Hello. I want to I take the floor just to speak about. There was a question yesterday about what is your roles. Someone asked the question, and I am happy to see this figure. No, I want this figure. I don't know why just. Where's the? Jen, 1 minute, please. Just 1 minute, because yesterday we had a question, and they were asking what is their role, their own role in the network. And when I see the graphic, the figure, I see the core team. I was happy to see this figure because I want them to know that they are the core team that you present. So I am happy to see this figure or this graphic, because you are this core team. Yesterday there was a question, what is your role? You remember the figure, the graphic, where there was a secretariat technique, a technical secretariat, and you have the national network. So when I see this, I just want to say that, so this is the project, where there was a project, the other graphic, the other figure, or the other graphic. Yes, you see, yes, no. So you see, yesterday you were asking what is your main role. For us, those who are here in Dakar, who are presently here and who will come in December, who will be trained in face-to-face training. When you will come back, you are the core team. You are this core team that we call the secretariat, technical secretariat. You are this core team. And there will be a lot of action that will be implemented during the upcoming day. So there are many people who were trained also online. All of them are in this network. But when we will start implementing, when we will have activity at the country level, you will have some small action, some project teams, some people working in this action, other people working in other action. So for me, and we speak about also partners that you will involve when you are working, some international expert committee. There were other people also involving in the area of TVET and digital. So for me, this is a good image of the vision that we have concerning you. You are this core team. So I hope that it's clear now for you. You are the one who will leading the network, those who are here. But the network is not only you. There are many other people that you will involve and that will work with them, especially if there are some actions, some project and so on. There are people in the network who will mobilize. But you are the one leading. Thank you, James, for this graphic. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Can you proceed on?
You bet. Thank you so much for making it real. So we can go to the next slide. So Jane's going to take us into a exercise now, where we're going to talk about some of the things that we've discussed and apply them to your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Before we do that, why don't we see if there are any questions or comments on what was said so far, and Marty and I'll take some questions about the network concept, about applying it in the field, and then we'll focus on the question here about the clarify persist, which we'll take some time to do next.
Okay, Jane, maybe I can ask the audience if we can collect some questions, 1 or 2 questions from the audience, from the participants. Yes. Okay. Si vous avez des questions.
If you have questions, we could take 2 or 3 questions.
No, I think everything is clear so far. So we can go to the exercise.
Okay, so then we would like to ask you to take a few minutes in your table, as we understand you're sitting by country of 3 to 4 people at each table, and take about 15 minutes to do a couple of things. First is a brief introduction, but not just your role and name, you already know that, but just take a couple minutes to describe why do you do what you do.
Why do
Why do you get up in the morning and
go
go to your job and do your work?
What
What drives you? Your passion for the work?
What are
What are your
key
key interests?
And then
And then the next,
everybody
everybody should please do that in their groups.
And then
And then the next question
is
is the one that's up on the slide. Is given your individual interests
in
in your work, what can be the shared purpose of your collective?
So
So two questions. Why do you do what you do? And then what do you think the group's shared purpose would be? And remember the graphic Marty shared. We're on the first step, which is clarify purpose and getting an understanding of what it is that you all seek to achieve through a network. So then we'll take 15 minutes for that, please. Any questions?
Et on prend 15 minutes.
We take 15 minutes. We know that you're seated by country, so you will think about two questions. Why do you think it is important to do what you're doing? Being in this workshop as the leaders and as next lead persons in your various countries to work on digital transformation. Are you already involved in networking activities in your countries? Is it clear?
It is important, okay, to be here doing what you are doing. Okay, as a person selected by your government, okay, to participate in this, what is your past experience? Have you been involved in, networking in your country? Maybe you can say one or two challenges you'll be going through. Jane, did I summarize the idea of the exercise?
I think we're trying to get more what you aspire to. What is the goal that you all can get excited about working toward together rather than what they've already done? That's interesting, and we'll have a chance to talk about past collaborations in another session later today. Does that make sense?
What do you think your group's shared purpose should be? Your shared purpose as a group. Yeah. Why do you think it is important that you are here doing what you are doing? Participate in this training. Okay.
Shall we take about 5 minutes, and then we'll hear from different groups and what you've decided upon, please.
Yes, Jane, you want to tell me something?
I was just giving the suggestion that we should wrap up in about 5 minutes, so we have a chance to hear from participants on what they've come up with for their shared purpose. And then we could have Jonas here,
Okay,
or Jose share about what.
maybe 2 more minutes, then
Sure.
then
We can
we
do.
wrap up. Okay.
Okay,
Will that be
I'll
answer?
leave it to you to decide.
Okay.
If
If they need more time, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. 5 minutes. Hi, Jane. Then we're going to wrap up.
Yes.
Yes, so if you either Jose or Jonas could please call on the table to share
what
what they've come up with. We can see what common themes people have and get greater clarity on the group's larger purpose within country as well as more broadly as an
Okay, let's
cross-country network.
Thank you. Let's give the floor to Mali. Mali, please come over here.
Okay.
Pas de protocole, il faut lire sur le matériel.
Non, viens. Tu dis en français, ils vont traduire. Ok.
Hello.
Good afternoon. On the two questions, why is it important to do what we are doing right now? We're here especially to share experiences with our peers. We're also here to pool, to share best practices and pool resources, human and material resources. We're also here to contribute to the development of TVET systems. That is with regard to the first question. Now, the second question, which relates to our experiences what will we do when we go back home? When we go back to Mali, we will build a national network in order to bring together all stakeholders and also develop a national strategy on the digital transformation of TVET systems with the support of UNESCO, and we will also work with the ministry in charge of technical training in Senegal, which has a lot of experience in this area, and with other countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other
Yes,
here?
you will be hearing from Ghana.
Great, thank you.
Okay, from Ghana, we captured 3 questions, and the importance of being here, past experience in networking and challenges, and shared purpose of the group. So we came up with importance of us being here. We are here to learn more about ICT and digitals in TVET, to enable us lead ICT in TVET development in Ghana. So in a nutshell, we are here to learn more about TVET, ICT, digitals, so that when we go back to Ghana, we will implement those things there with our policymakers. Then with the network, we have some links with GIZ, World Bank, JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency, and others, bilateral and multilateral agencies. We've had some links with them. And the challenges are, interests are always not the same. They will be having their interests, the country too will be having their interest. Then misconception of some of the staff. That's the Ministry of Education, TVET agencies. Some might think that there's something special in there. That is why some people are assigned to do that. So misconception within the Ministry of Education. Then the third one is shared purpose of the group, and we are saying that to improve of ICT in TVET in Ghana. That is what we captured from Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghana. Now you'll be hearing from Liberia. 1 minute. Yeah. Okay. See.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, we want to start by saying COVID-19 pandemic has taught us a lot of lessons, and the presence of COVID-19 disrupted almost every activity, and education is no exception. So the need to focus on technology cannot be overly emphasized. To the first question, why is it important to do what we do in this particular training? We want to say as Liberia, the significance of our gathering here is to have the relevant knowledge and skills and tools to influence digital transformation. You got me?
Yeah.
And digital transformation in the TV system of our country. Our group's shared purpose. We say our shared purpose is to adequately get ourselves potentially equipped in order to replicate, transmit, or effectuate the knowledge gained for the good of our country's TV system. And we are committed to serving as ambassadors for digital transformation, thereby building a national network. And we are convinced with the requisite support, we can ably and responsibly achieve this mission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Je rappelle la question, c'est what do you think your group shared purpose should be? Keep this in mind.
D'accord, merci bien.
Thank you. For our part, we are here to share experiences, gain knowledge, and see how to benefit from other people on digital transformation of TVET systems. Now, with regard to the question of networks, in Burkina Faso, we have the various ministry. A ministry has developed a sectorial policy framework, and we can rely on this policy framework in order to build our core team in Burkina Faso.
Non?
We want to contribute to establish, to ensure that there is a digital transformation that is beneficial to all stakeholders, whether we're talking about learners or the teachers. All stakeholders involved in TVET should be able to benefit from this digital transformation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senegal.
Thank you. I would like to say that Senegal's presence here is due to the willingness to contribute to the development of digital technology in vocational training and participate in the emergence of our country. This capacity building workshop organized by UNESCO will no doubt allow us to share experiences, but also to have the necessary tools in order to identify the persons who will be able to participate in the network that we will be building. This network will play a decisive role in the promotion of digital technology as well as in the digital transformation in TVET in this country. We also want to develop and strengthen the activities that we have we're already conducting. This is in a nutshell why the Senegal group is present at this capacity building workshop for leaders who will form the core team of the network, which will be in charge of digital transformation in this country. Thank you.
This is Senegal. If you would allow one last speaker, Gambia would like to say something. Yes, Gambia, please.
C'est bon?
C'est ça. Oui. Merci.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We, from the Gambia, we were a little bit on the other side, but when we came, we decided to look at our shared goal. And our shared goal as far as, or shared purpose as far as this is concerned, is to go back and create a network that would be self-sustaining, and that where we will be able to also share some of the key indicators that we've learned here, such as how do we improve on the competencies of the training and the like. On the networks that are available there, we have a group of service providers that are in the private sectors that are into TVET, and they are very active and they work collaboratively with the institutions. Then we also have the other organizations such as the World Bank, the GIZs, the International Trade Centers, amongst others as this. Our purpose is actually to try to improve on TVET quality delivery in our country. So thank you.
Okay, Jane, over to you.
Thank you so much. And Marty and Emily, I'll invite you to come in also. I took copious notes, and there are a lot of themes
that stand out amongst all of the shared purposes that you all identified. I think clearly the key is focusing on digital transformation of TVET and how you can enable that to happen in country. And it sounds like some of you are already doing some work in that area. So you want to expand and use the connections that you're building today to advance those further in order to lift up your countries over the long term, from improving TVET and the education opportunities that will in turn benefit your respective countries. I think that was a great point. The gentleman from Liberia shared that COVID has raised the visibility of the need for this transformation. So it's a bit like what Marty was talking about previously of the crisis that he saw in the US Gulf region after Hurricane Katrina, that perhaps this is a ripe opportunity to begin working in this networked way, because COVID has so shocked the system of so many sectors that people might be more willing to work in new ways, particularly as digital transformation allows for people to work remotely. Both teachers and learners benefit significantly from that. I think that was a great observation of being very customer focused. And the comment from Burkina Faso about how you want the digital transformation to make everything easier and better for the learners and teachers. And so the focus of the network as the customer first and how to make that more effective and efficient for them and sustainable is particularly valuable. And then just one last shared thought, and then I'll turn it to Marty or Annalie if you have comments of just the idea of by your coming together, there's opportunities to share best practice, to learn from each other, to find opportunities for pooled resources, whether it's financial or human capital related, because perhaps one country is excelling at a particular aspect of digital transformation while others are struggling with that. There's that opportunity for cross-pollination and helping each other move forward together because you're traveling the same road together. So Marty and Annalie, do you have any other themes that you can draw out from the discussion?
I have one thing that I was thinking. I think it's very interesting. Based on my experience working in many African countries and also in Asia, working as a policy advisor to working with ministries of education, and also be involved with NGOs, civil organizations in the country. What struck me is, for instance, something that Ghana brought up, and that is this misconception of what it really means to have a common agenda, to expand educational opportunities, in this case, digitalization of TVET, and to really get all the organizations involved in the country to really understand that it's not enough to just align their agendas or mission with the government's as sector plans, but it's also to work together in a network setting. And I think this is a really interesting, exciting approach to actually further scale up the activities that's going on in the country. And so what you're will be learning during this workshop is you will be equipped with some tools how to deal with these challenges that you have to really make all the actors, all the organizations in the country involved, and that you work towards a common goal.
Thank you, Annalie. Marty, did you have any comments?
No, other than to say it seems like there's a fairly consistent understanding of the shared purpose. There, as Annalie has mentioned, there was some surfacing of some of the challenges that folks are going to face in getting there to be a common interest amongst all the parties. And I think that the tools and exercises that we will continue to provide should reinforce the skills and the ideas of how to draw people into that shared purpose. It also sounded to me, Jane, like folks were beginning to think fairly clearly about who should be part of the network to have it be successful. And that might be another good thing to continue to spend some time and energy on, is thinking about who, as organizations or as people, who can really be champions of this effort to help their networks be successful.
Thank you. And I wanted to just emphasize the point that Annalie raised about the distinction between getting all of the organizations aligned around the government plans or the multilateral agencies' plans for what digital transformation should look like. That's one piece, but perhaps the most important piece is getting the organizations on the ground to work as a network. Because if we all know, if funding is flowing from these various organizations to the, from the larger institutions, government agencies, multilateral agencies, NGOs, if the resources are flowing to the field level, it's expected and of course commonplace that everybody will just agree to whatever's being asked of them in order to garner the resources. But the whole purpose of the network should be to help the people on the ground who are delivering TVET and trying to adapt to the digital transformation that can help make their work easier, that they see the benefit themselves, that in fact, they embrace the opportunity to do the work in community as part of a network, the shared resources, the fact that they aren't overwhelmed because they have a peer group that they're working on addressing an issue together. The way to engage the network members is through helping the people on the ground do their work better so that it is more effective, rather than just agreeing to whatever's being asked of them because of the resource flows. So that's the key benefit, is the network has to serve the purposes of the end user, the teachers. The impact in the field has to be noticeable because of the network working together. And then that other piece of aligning around a larger national or sector level agenda, that's important. But it's, as we started the session, is the actions speak louder than the words. It can't just be the words of, yes, we commit to aligning around this agenda, but not working in community on the ground, if that makes sense. So do we have any questions or comments from participants on what we've just talked about? Because we're happy to address any of those before we take a break.
No, I don't see any. Yes, yes. Can you go ahead with your question?
I wanted to ask a question with regard to I cannot say the name of the person who said it, but the person who said the objective was to focus on the network, on the growth of the network, and then she explained that we should find good partnerships. And there's a portion where another speaker said that I'm sorry, I'm trying to look for that portion. Another speaker said that to ensure that organizations work together to help the network find the right stakeholders. I did not understand what they meant, saying that you should focus on the network to help the network to grow. Can I have more explanation on that on that issue? I don't know whether my question is understood.
Jane, can you answer his question?
Yes. So I'm trying to make sure I understand.
When we talk about focus on growing the network, it's not to say, okay, let's grow a whole new institution, but rather focus on the connectivity amongst members in the networks. So we're not talking about, let's just create new collaborations for the sake of for the sake of collaborating, but rather how can those connections help us to do the work better? So the network connections really should be instrumental in doing the work at the ministry level, at the field level amongst NGOs, and the interface between the NGOs and the ministries. So it really is in service to the larger mission, which is digital transformation of TVET and how that can best serve the learners and the teachers and get first larger numbers, greater access, greater efficiency, greater sustainability, greater effectiveness. So designing the tools toward those stakeholders. And then the network is geared toward connecting in order to get an optimal result. So I don't know if that answers the question. We're not talking about just growing networks instead of organizations. It's broadening your focus. so that it includes the range of actors that you need to get your work done. I think there's a tendency, certainly what I've seen with a lot of leaders in the social sector, whether in the government sector or in the nonprofit sector, is that we get so focused on our day-to-day work, and it's very time consuming. And at the same time, the resources we have are so limited relative to the scale of the problem that could be what occupies all of your time and energy. And in fact, if you focus on the network and cultivating those relationships of learning best practices, finding resources outside of your organization or sector, that you can actually get some help to do the work that you're doing even better, because you don't rely on only your own organization's resources or only your own departments, but you can draw on the support. And then likewise, other organizations can draw on support from your organization because you have an expertise, you have certain skills or connections that can in turn support the network's work. Does that answer the question?
With interest. So because you have two questions, one from Senegal and the second one from Burkina Faso. Would you allow we have the two questions before we go to coffee break?
Sure, that's no problem.
Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur le.
Thank you very much, dear facilitator, for giving me the floor. I have just understood that 3 things are essential. The first one is to have the competencies, second, the network, and third, the information. And in this regard, we are currently working on developing the competencies to put in place a national network that will be in charge of digital transformation development in our respective countries. But beyond the national network is the question of pooling the efforts of the networks in the countries a problem, and how are we able to capitalize on this project in order to have a global digital transformation in the sub-region? Thank you.
So the network in country is very much aligned with building a regional cross-national network because they can support each other. So again, your experiences in one country, in Liberia, Burkina Faso, there may be some programs or approaches that are working really well in one country that you can bring that expertise, knowledge, competency back to the broader network in gatherings such as what you're having today, and then share those with each other so that your colleagues from another country don't need to reinvent the wheel and go up that learning curve on their own. At the same time, you can share challenges and things that you're struggling with, and perhaps there's a peer organization that has already dealt with that problem and has a suggestion or a resource that they could refer you to. So they're mutually reinforcing. They're not in conflict with each other at all. And again, it's all toward the larger cause of digital transformation for the region. So you do have that shared purpose, and that is what kind of brings together the regional participants at the cross-national level. But again, a lot of those connections and knowledge can translate directly to what's happening in country.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My question is related to what we are doing here, because we're supposed to be a core team. It's to start the network. Now, based on the experience of the trainers, what could be the setting up of the actors? How will be the group composed in order to ensure success?
Yes, and we will get to some of that time together tomorrow. But it's not just the formal structure that's most important. In fact, I would argue that that's less important than building stronger relationships amongst all of you that are gathered here today, that you get to know each other's individual interests, institutional interests, get to know who's skilled at certain things, who has experience in certain things, who's succeeding at various programmatic approaches, who's very good at understanding the demands of the international multilateral agencies, the World Bank, JIS. All of those actors are kind of stakeholders in your orbit that you need to work with effectively. So getting a better handle on who's in the room and what various resources and skills that each person brings, and also getting to know each other as human beings, getting to trust each other and know if you're struggling with a challenge, who might you call when you pick up the phone and say, maybe I can just get some advice from somebody in my network who's dealing with this challenge. Or if you're having a great success, maybe you can take the time to share that with your peers and those that you might know that are struggling with that same challenge. Can you share the wealth and the experience that you've gained so that your partners can also benefit from the experience you've had on the ground?
I think we will go for coffee break.
Okay.
But before we go to coffee break, just remind that we have two key principles for network building. The mission, you have to focus on the mission, to build trust, to have humility, and to build a constellation. Did I say it right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the four key principles. Okay, we're going to have the coffee break, and then we come back in 15 minutes.
Okay,
That sounds fun.
And
Thank
then
you.
just
Thank you for the next question.
Shall we
just have you share the slides? We've been having difficulty,
and
I'll just ask you to advance the slides.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. See you in 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.